So think about your worldview right now, like your political affiliations, your scientific assumptions, or just your deeply held beliefs about human nature.
Right, the big stuff.
Yeah, the big stuff. Now imagine treating all of that like a weather app on your phone.
Like a weather app. I like where this is going.
Right, because, you pull it up in the morning, you see a little cloud icon and maybe a 70% chance of rain.
Yeah.
But you look at that 70% probability and you don't stand in the middle of your living room and declare to your family, it is an absolute immutable fact that the universe will pour water on me today.
Right, because you recognize that the weather app is just a model. It's an educated guess.
Exactly. It's just a synthesis of radar data and atmospheric pressure and historical trends. So you grab an umbrella just in case, but you don't treat the meteorologist's prediction as some sacred religious text.
You treat it as a probability.
Yeah.
Because intuitively you understand the difference between the map of the weather and the actual physical territory of the sky. The app is not the rain.
Yes, the app is not the rain. But consider how rarely we apply that exact same weather app flexibility to the rest of our lives.
Oh, almost never. We get so rigidly locked in.
We really do. And that's exactly why today we are doing a deep dive into a massive stack of biographical texts, interviews, and literary analyses focused on a single, really fascinating premise.
Which is incredibly relevant today.
Oh, absolutely. Because in an era where everyone seems completely certain about their political, scientific, and social beliefs, what if the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed is actually learning how to systematically doubt everything?
Yeah, a systematic doubting.
And our guide for this mission is Robert Anton Wilson. He was a 20th and 21st century writer, futurist, psychologist, and a guy who cheerfully described himself as an agnostic mystic.
Which, I mean, agnostic mystic might sound like an oxymoron at first glance.
Right, because they seem like total opposite.
Exactly. Mysticism implies this direct, profound connection to the divine or the fundamental nature of the universe. But agnosticism implies a strict suspension of belief regarding those exact same things.
It sounds totally contradictory.
It does, but for Wilson, that contradiction was the whole point. His primary ambition was to achieve a state he called generalized agnosticism.
And we should clarify for the listener, he didn't just mean agnosticism about a deity, right?
No, not at all. He meant agnosticism applied to reality itself. He wanted to dismantle our conditioned associations.
To basically stop us from treating any single mental model, whether it's Marxism, capitalism, religion, or even materialist science, as the definitive absolute truth.
Exactly. None of them are the absolute truth. They're just maps.
I really want to trace the genesis of a mind that operates like that because, nobody is born questioning the fundamental fabric of reality.
Usually you need a catalyst for that kind of shift.
Right. To develop a philosophy of universal doubt, you have to experience a profound failure of the normal world. You have to watch the established authorities completely fail you.
And the source material highlights that for Wilson, this fracture happened incredibly early.
Yeah, it happened within his own body, which is wild. He was born Robert Edward Wilson in January 1932 in Brooklyn, grew up in Flatbush and later Garrettson Beach. But the pivotal event of his childhood was contracting polio.
And we have to remember, polio in the 1930s and 40s carried a terrifying cultural and physical weight. It was a paralyzing, often fatal disease.
It was basically every parent's worst nightmare.
Totally. And the medical establishment's standard approach at the time was rigid immobilization.
Which means what, exactly?
They would bind patients in heavy casts and splints. They essentially locked the affected limbs in place, theorizing that this prevented deformities.
Wow. But the biographical texts note that Wilson's family didn't do that. They eventually utilized a highly controversial alternative approach called the Kenny method.
Right.
I read about this in the sources, but help me out with the mechanics here. What did the Kenny method actually entail, and why were people so against it?
Well, the Kenny method was developed by Elizabeth Kenny. She was an uncredentialed Australian nurse.
Okay, so no medical degree.
Right, no degree. And instead of immobilizing the paralyzed limbs, her method involved applying hot, moist compresses to relieve muscle spasms.
Oh, interesting. So heat instead of casts.
Yeah, heat followed by intense, active physical therapy. She physically manipulated the patient's limbs to retrain the neural pathways. It was agonizing work, but it focused on movement rather than stagnation.
That makes a lot of sense from a modern perspective, but why the controversy?
The controversy stemmed from the fact that it flat out contradicted the reigning biomechanical theories of the era. The American Medical Association, which was the absolute, unquestionable medical authority of the time, completely repudiated her.
They just rejected it entirely.
Completely. They rejected the Kenny method as unscientific and dangerous.
Yet, for young Robert Anton Wilson, this unapproved fringe method was the very thing that worked.
It did. It provided him with effective treatment and restored his mobility.
While the official authorized method of casting might have left him permanently immobilized. So, I mean, how does an experience like that wire a child's brain?
Well, think about it. It creates a massive foundational cognitive dissonance.
Because you're being told one thing by the experts, but experiencing another.
Exactly. Imagine being a child suffering from a terrifying illness.
Mm.
The highest authorities in the land, the doctors with the degrees, the prestigious hospitals, are declaring that this hot compressed therapy is absolute nonsense.
But your own subjective experience, your own physical body, is giving you totally contradictory data.
Right. Your body is telling you, this is actually curing me. This instills a visceral physical lesson. The consensus reality agreed upon by the experts is not necessarily the objective reality.
Wow. So it plants the deepest possible seed of skepticism toward official truths.
Yes. It's a localized red pill. It teaches you that authority does not equal accuracy.
And that skepticism just seems to rapidly accelerate as he pursues his education. He goes to Catholic grammar schools, which are, heavily dogmatic, but then he gets admitted to Brooklyn Technical High School.
Which is a huge shift.
Yeah. What happens when he leaves that strict Catholic framework?
Brooklyn Tech was a highly selective, rigorous environment. It forced him out of an isolated parochial worldview. The sources detail a staggering breadth of intellectual consumption during this period.
He was just reading everything.
Everything. He immerses himself in the Western philosophical tradition. He reads the literary modernists like James Joyce and Ezra Pound, who were actively deconstructing the English language.
And science fiction, right?
Oh, heavily. Writers like Robert A. Heinlein, which allows him to conceptualize entirely different societal structures.
The sources also point to one specific thinker he discovered during this time who seems to form the absolute bedrock of his philosophy, Alfred Korzybski.
Yes, Korzybski is crucial here.
So who is he, and what is the core idea Wilson took from him?
Alfred Korzybski was a Polish-American scholar. He developed an interdisciplinary field called general semantics in the 1920s and 30s.
General semantics, okay.
Yeah, and it's essentially the study of how human beings interact with the world through their nervous systems and the languages they use.
Okay, so how our brains and words shape reality.
Right, and Korzybski's most famous dictum, and arguably the single most important concept in Robert Anton Wilson's entire worldview, is a very simple phrase: the map is not the territory.
The map is not the territory. So, the word water doesn't actually make you wet.
Exactly. Or, the menu is not the meal.
Right.
Korzybski argued that we never experience objective reality directly. The universe is an infinite storm of subatomic particles and energy waves.
It's just chaos out there.
Chaos. But our nervous system acts as a filter. It strips away most of that information and creates an abstraction, a highly simplified sensory map.
So what we see isn't actually what's there, it's just our brain's summary of it.
Precisely. Then we use language to describe that sensory map, which is a second abstraction.
So we're 2 steps removed from reality.
And Korzybski pointed out that most human conflict and confusion arises because people forget they are looking at a map. They mistake their neuro-linguistic abstraction for the physical territory of the universe.
That is so profound. So Wilson graduates high school in 1950, already equipped with this deep skepticism of language and authority.
And he doesn't take a neat linear career path after that.
No, not at all. He works as an ambulance driver, an engineering aide, a salesman, a medical orderly. He studies electrical engineering and math at Brooklyn Polytechnic, then switches to English at NYU.
But he never finishes a degree at either place.
Right. He just absorbs everything. Psychoanalysis, Carl Jung, Wilhelm Reich. He even reads Ayn Rand for a while.
Though the sources make sure to note he later explicitly repudiated her philosophy.
Yeah, that's an important caveat. But he was just an intellectual omnivore.
He was gathering all these different maps of reality. Political maps, psychological maps, artistic maps. He was looking at how different people structured their subjective universes.
And eventually he finds himself in an environment where he is literally paid to observe this map-making process on a mass scale.
Oh, this is the best part.
By the late 1950s, he starts working as a freelance journalist. He adopts the name Robert Anton Wilson, taking his maternal grandfather's name, supposedly saving his birth name, Edward, for the great American novel he intended to write.
And this trajectory, leads him to a job in 1965 that sounds completely bizarre but perfectly suited for him.
Yes. He becomes an associate editor at Playboy magazine, and he stays there until 1971.
Which is wild to think about.
Wilson himself actually noted that Playboy paid him better than anyone else and, crucially, never expected him to conform. But his specific role there is what really fascinates me.
The Playboy Forum.
Yes, he and his collaborator, Robert Shea, were tasked with editing the Playboy Forum. What exactly was that section?
The Playboy Forum was initially designed as a letters section where readers could respond to Hugh Hefner's Playboy philosophy editorial column.
Okay, pretty standard magazine stuff.
But you have to contextualize the era. It's the mid to late 1960s. The Vietnam War is escalating, the counterculture is exploding, political assassinations are fresh in the public memory.
There's just a general sense of paranoia permeating American society.
Exactly. And because Playboy was seen as a major countercultural platform, the Forum became a massive clearinghouse for fringe ideas.
Right, so they aren't just getting letters about centerfolds. They are on the front lines, opening mail from a deeply paranoid American public.
They are absorbing massive, intricate conspiracy theories every single day.
They are reading daily missives from people who genuinely believe the world is secretly controlled by the Illuminati, or Freemasons, or the banking elite, or extraterrestrials.
And put yourself in Wilson's shoes at that desk.
Yeah.
He has Korzybski's general semantics in his toolkit. He has the skepticism forged by his polio treatment.
So he's not just taking this at face value.
No, when he reads these incredibly elaborate paranoid letters, he doesn't read them as literal truth. But he also doesn't dismiss them as pure insanity.
How does he read them then?
He reads them as psychological data. He is witnessing the bizarre, desperate architecture of human meaning-making.
Because people need things to make sense.
Exactly. When people feel powerless in the face of chaotic historical events, they construct these elaborate paranoid maps to make sense of the territory. They connect random, terrifying data points into a cohesive story where someone, somewhere, is in control.
Let me pause you there because the mechanics of that are tricky. If you sit at a desk for 6 years, just bathing in thousands of letters detailing how the Illuminati control the world, human nature usually dictates one of two outcomes.
Right.
Either the sheer volume of the paranoia infects you, and you become a true believer yourself.
Or you react defensively.
Yeah, you become a rigid, dogmatic debunker who violently rejects anything slightly unconventional. So how did Wilson avoid falling into either of those traps?
Because of his generalized agnosticism, he chose a brilliant third path. He saw the psychological utility and the danger of these belief systems. He realized that all these letter writers were trapped in their own subjective reality tunnels, utterly convinced that their map was the one true territory.
And he realized that you can't cure conspiracy theorists by just yelling facts at them?
Never. Because facts are just more data that their paranoid filter will reinterpret to fit the conspiracy.
So if you can't debunk them with facts, what do?
You overload their system. You use fiction to aggressively disorient them.
Oh, this is brilliant.
Wilson and Shea decided to take every single conspiracy theory they read about in the Playboy mailroom, mash them all together, and just weaponize them.
Which brings us to the monumental cult classic they co-authored, the Illuminatus trilogy.
A masterpiece of chaos.
Published in 1975, the sources say the trilogy was explicitly advertised as a fairy tale for paranoids.
Such a great tagline.
It originally consisted of 3 volumes, The Eye in the Pyramid, The Golden Apple, and Leviathan, though it was later published as one massive tome. I really want to spend some time exploring the plot of this book because it perfectly illustrates his philosophy in action. It's not just a story, it's an intervention.
The plot defies simple summary, honestly, because it is intentionally chaotic. But the core narrative involves 2 New York City detectives investigating the bombing of a left-wing magazine called Confrontation.
Sounds like a standard noir setup.
It starts that way. But this investigation drags them into an ancient global war between the Illuminati, who seek absolute authoritarian control over humanity.
And the Discordians.
Yes, the Discordians, a group of anarchic worshippers of Eris, the Greek goddess of chaos.
And the sources outline a subplot that perfectly captures the sheer beautiful absurdity of what they were doing here. It's an alternative account of the John F. Kennedy assassination.
Oh, this part is amazing.
In Wilson and Shea's version, there aren't just 1 or 2 shooters. There are 5 different snipers in Dealey Plaza. Yes, but they are all working for entirely different opposing causes and secret societies. You know, the mafia, the CIA, the Illuminati, you name it. And they all just happen to be preparing to assassinate the president at the exact same moment, independently of one another.
That is the perfect distillation of their method. They take the conspiracy mindset, which constantly seeks to find a single grand unifying theory behind historical tragedy, and they push it to its absolute, logical, absurd extreme.
And the climax of the trilogy is equally bizarre.
Yeah, it occurs at a giant European rock concert where the audience collectively faces the danger of becoming a mass human sacrifice to awaken a dormant, Lovecraftian entity.
Just totally unhinged in the best way. Now, the sources mention the book popularized two very specific concepts that actually entered the counterculture lexicon. One is a religion called Discordianism.
Discordianism actually originated slightly earlier with thinkers like Greg Hill and Carrie Thornley, but Illuminatus really brought it into the mainstream underground.
And it's basically a religion centered around chaos.
It's a religion, or perhaps a parody of a religion, or maybe a parody of a parody centered around the worship of chaos. Wilson is actually recognized within Discordianism as a pope and a saint.
Wow.
It serves as the philosophical counterweight to the Illuminati in the book. If the Illuminati represent the human desire for absolute rigid order and control, the Discordians represent the recognition that the universe is fundamentally chaotic, unpredictable, and absurd.
And the second concept they popularized is a word, fnord, F-N-O-R-D. What exactly is a fnord in the context of the book?
In the universe of Illuminatus, a fnord is a typographic symbol secretly inserted into newspapers and magazines by the Illuminati.
Just hidden right in the text.
Exactly. Through childhood conditioning in schools, the general population is trained not to consciously see the word. Their eyes literally skip over it.
But they still feel it, right?
Yes. Seeing the word unconsciously induces a profound feeling of unease, anxiety, and vague paranoia. So when a citizen reads a news story about a political crisis or a crime wave and feels a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread, it's not just the news itself causing it.
It's the hidden fnords manipulating their nervous system.
Exactly.
That is a staggering metaphor for modern media consumption. It's essentially the analog precursor to doom scrolling.
It really is.
We consume algorithmic news feeds. We don't know exactly what the underlying code is doing to our brains, but we walk away feeling terrified and powerless.
Wilson saw that mechanism decades ago.
But he wasn't just writing satire. The overarching technique he was deploying with Illuminatus is something he called guerrilla ontology, or what the book affectionately refers to as Operation Mindfuck.
Yes.
Can you break down the mechanics of guerrilla ontology for the listener?
Well, we have to define the terms first. Ontology is the branch of philosophy that studies the nature of being. It asks the question, what is real? And guerrilla warfare is unconventional, asymmetric warfare. Therefore, guerrilla ontology is the tactic of deliberately mixing undeniably true, verifiable historical facts with wild imaginative fiction.
And the purpose is just to mess with the reader.
The purpose is to completely disorient the reader's sense of reality.
So you present a historical fact, then another fact, and then a totally fabricated, absurd conspiracy theory, but you write them all with the exact same authoritative academic tone.
Exactly. The goal isn't to trick the reader into believing the fake thing. The goal is to break the reader's reliance on the narrator's authority.
To make them do the work.
Yes, it forces the reader to stop passively consuming information. They have to stop and ask themselves, wait, is this part real? I can verify the first sentence, but how do I know the third sentence is true? What heuristic am I using to accept one claim but reject another?
It is a literary mechanism designed to forcefully induce generalized agnosticism in the reader.
Beautifully said.
There is an incredible quote from an interview Wilson did later in life with Richard Metzger for the book Disinformation. The interviews. I think it perfectly encapsulates guerrilla ontology in action.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
Metzger asks Wilson, "You've studied the Illuminati for 30 years. What are their aims?" And Wilson replies, "Usually when people ask me that question, I give them some kind of a put-on, so I'll tell you the truth, for once. After investigating the Illuminati and their critics for the last 30 years, I think the Illuminati was a short-lived society of free thinkers and democratic reformers that formed a secret society within Freemasonry, using Freemasonry as a cover so they could plot to overthrow all the kings in Europe and the Pope."
So notice how he starts with actual verifiable history. There really was a Bavarian Illuminati founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt.
Right.
And they were indeed Enlightenment thinkers advocating for reason against religious and monarchical influence. But then he takes the paranoid fantasy, the idea that they are an immortal evil cabal, and he subverts it entirely.
Right, he adds, completely deadpan. I'm very happy that they succeeded in overthrowing all the kings. I just wish that they had completed the job and gotten rid of the royal family in England, too. I'm sorry they haven't finished off the Pope yet either, but I think they're still working on the project, and I wish them luck.
Look at the psychological jujitsu he's performing there. The conspiracy theorists believe the Illuminati are an evil cabal trying to enslave humanity. Wilson doesn't debunk the cabal's existence.
He agrees they exist, but flips their moral polarity.
He says, no, they're the good guys trying to get rid of archaic monarchies, and frankly, I wish they were doing a better job. He diffuses the paranoia with high-level satire.
Because he exposes that people actually want to believe the Illuminati are in charge.
Exactly, because the alternative to human history is just a chaotic, leaderless mess of competing interests and random events is actually much more terrifying to the human ego.
Illuminatus even won the Prometheus Hall of Fame Award for Best Classic Fiction in 1986. And he wrote other fictional series, too, like the Schrodinger's Cat Trilogy, which explored quantum mechanics across alternate universes, and the historical Illuminatus Chronicles.
But fiction was just his laboratory.
Right. He soon realized that the mechanisms of conspiracy theories, the way we selectively filter information to support our preconceived notions, wasn't just something paranoid mailroom letter writers did. It is how human perception functions on a biological level.
Which brings us to his nonfiction work.
Yes, where he introduces the concept of the reality tunnel.
The transition from his fiction to his autobiographical and nonfiction workbooks like Cosmic Trigger I, Prometheus Rising, and Quantum Psychology is where his philosophical impact really deepens.
He moves from satirizing belief systems to decoding the actual neurological mechanics of how we form them.
And to do this, he heavily utilized and promoted the ideas of his friend and frequent collaborator, the controversial psychologist Timothy Leary.
The sources specifically mention he advocated for Leary's 8-circuit model of consciousness. Now, I've heard of this, but it sounds intensely complicated. Walk me through the mechanics of this model. How does it actually map human consciousness?
The 8-circuit model is a theoretical framework suggesting that the human nervous system evolves and processes information through 8 distinct stages, or circuits.
Okay.
Wilson used this not as hard biological science, but as a deeply useful psychological map. The first 4 circuits are terrestrialize. They deal with everyday survival and socialization.
Give me a brief breakdown of those first 4.
So the first is the oral biosurvival circuit. It develops in infancy and governs basic safety versus danger. Am I nourished? Am I safe?
Very primal.
Exactly. The second is the anal emotional territorial circuit, which develops as a toddler. It governs power dynamics, dominance, submission, and territory. This is where tribal politics and nationalism originate.
So when 2 politicians are just yelling at each other on a debate stage, Wilson would say they are operating entirely out of the second circuit, just primate territorial posturing.
Yes, exactly, just throwing rhetorical feces at each other. The third is the time-binding semantic circuit, which deals with language, logic, and mathematics. It allows us to understand abstract concepts and pass knowledge through generations.
Okay, that's where human civilization really starts.
Right. And the fourth is the sociosexual circuit, which governs adult morality, societal roles, and reproduction. For most of human history, Wilson argued, humanity has been entirely locked within these 4 basic circuits.
But the model has 8. What are their upper 4?
The upper 4 are considered post-terrestrial or evolutionary circuits. The 5th is the neurosomatic circuit, dealing with sensory bliss and the integration of mind and body, often accessed through meditation, yoga, or psychedelics.
Okay.
The 6th is the neurogenetic circuit, which involves accessing the collective unconscious or ancestral memory.
Very Jungian.
Very. The 7th is the neuroatomic circuit, involving cosmic consciousness and a deep awareness of the interconnectedness of all life. And finally, the 8th is the non-local quantum circuit, where consciousness is theorized to transcend space and time entirely.
Wilson synthesized this mapping of consciousness with a futurist framework he and Leary called SMI-LE, SMI squared LE. What does that acronym stand for, and how does it relate to human psychology?
SMI-LE stands for space migration, intelligence increase, and life extension.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it was a fiercely optimistic, transhumanist vision of the future. But Wilson viewed these not just as technological goals, but as psychological necessities to break humanity out of its lower circuit conditioning.
How so?
Take life extension. If humanity is constantly driven by the first circuit, the biosurvival fear of imminent death, we hoard resources and act defensively. If technology extends life indefinitely, that deep biological anxiety is fundamentally altered.
Oh, I see.
Similarly, space migration shatters the second circuit, the territorial circuit. When humanity expands into infinite space, the fierce, violent primate battles over finite borders on Earth become obsolete.
Because there's no longer a shortage of territory.
Exactly. And intelligence increase via technology or neurochemistry upgrades our semantic third circuit.
But to get humanity to that transhumanist future, you have to fix the immediate problem. The fact that people are trapped in their subjective reality tunnels right now.
Yes.
Let's dive deep into this concept because it is the central pillar of Wilson's nonfiction. What exactly makes up a reality tunnel?
Wilson posited that from the moment you are born, you are bombarded with an infinite stream of data from the universe. Your nervous system simply cannot process billions of data points per second.
It would just fry our brains.
It would. So, as a survival mechanism, your brain builds filters. Through your genetics, your upbringing, your culture, your language, and your personal traumatic or joyful experiences, your brain learns to ignore certain data and emphasize other data.
And over time, those conditioned associations solidify.
Exactly. You build a tunnel.
So a conservative sees the exact same news event as a liberal. They are looking at the same objective territory. But because their reality tunnels are constructed with entirely different ideological filters, they interpret the data in completely contradictory ways.
Yes. Or a deeply religious person and a staunch atheist can look at the same starry night sky and experience two entirely different, mutually exclusive realities.
Both looking at the exact same stars.
Same stars, different tunnels. The tragedy, according to Wilson, is that almost everyone forgets they are in a tunnel. They mistake their highly filtered, subjective, and limited perception for the objective, absolute, universal truth.
And when you believe your tunnel is the only valid reality, anyone who disagrees with you isn't just seeing things differently. They are fundamentally broken, evil, or stupid.
Which is the root of almost all human conflict. In books like Quantum Psychology, Wilson was trying to provide neurosemantic techniques to help the reader break free of their reality tunnel.
Not to find the one true objective tunnel, but to be able to consciously switch between them.
To try on different perspectives like try on hats.
And to justify this psychological flexibility, he leaned heavily into quantum mechanics, which leads us to his profound critique of the scientific establishment. Because, a listener might think, well, scientists aren't trapped in reality tunnels. They use the scientific method. They are objective.
But Wilson fundamentally disagreed with that assumption.
Yeah, in his 1986 book, The New Inquisition, Wilson argued that mainstream science suffers from a massive, largely unexamined bias, a strong materialist bias.
He argued that scientists often confuse their materialist model of the universe with the actual universe.
The sources mentioned he cited concepts like Bell's theorem and the experiments of Elaine Aspect to critique this materialist bias. Now, quantum physics is notoriously dense.
It is, yeah.
So walk me through the mechanics here. What did Elaine Aspect's experiments actually do, and why did Wilson believe they challenged materialist metaphysics?
We have to contrast it with classical materialism first. Materialism is the worldview that the universe is essentially a giant clockwork machine made of dead matter bumping into itself. Everything is local, and everything is strictly governed by physical cause and effect.
Like billiard balls on a table.
Exactly. But in the early 1980s, a physicist named Elaine Aspect conducted experiments testing Bell's theorem. Aspect looked at pairs of entangled photons, particles of light.
What does entangled mean in this specific context?
It means the two particles share a quantum state. Aspect's experiments demonstrated that if you separate these entangled photons by a vast distance and change the state of one, the other photon instantaneously changes its state to match, with zero time delay.
Wait, instantaneously, even if they are miles apart, that would mean the information is traveling faster than the speed of light?
Exactly. Which classical physics says is impossible. This phenomenon is called quantum non-locality. It suggests that on a fundamental level, the universe is not just separate bits of matter bumping into each other. It is deeply, instantaneously interconnected in ways that classical materialist mechanics cannot explain.
And Wilson seized upon this.
He did. He argued that modern physics has essentially disproved strict materialist metaphysics. The universe is much weirder, much more deeply connected, and much less mechanical than we thought.
But despite these discoveries, Wilson argued that mainstream science, by and large, violently clings to the classical materialist view. He coined a brilliant phrase for this: irrational rationalism.
It's a great term.
He was deeply critical of scientific types who possess overly rigid belief systems. Let me read this quote from a 1988 interview about the New Inquisition. He says, "I coined the term irrational rationalism because those people claim to be rationalists, but they're governed by such a heavy body of taboos. They're so fearful and so hostile and so narrow and frightened and uptight and dogmatic."
He actually goes on to say he got tired of satirizing fundamentalist Christianity and decided to satirize fundamentalist materialism instead.
Yeah, he literally says the materialist fundamentalists are funnier than the Christian fundamentalists because they think they're rational. They're never skeptical about anything except the things they have a prejudice against. None of them ever says anything skeptical about the AMA or about anything in establishment science or any entrenched dogma. They're only skeptical about new ideas that frighten them. They're actually dogmatically committed to what they were taught when they were in college.
Notice how he deliberately circles right back to the AMA, the American Medical Association.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The exact same institution that rejected the Kenny method that treated his childhood polio. His generalized agnosticism spares no one.
He is arguing that skepticism is useless if it is only weaponized against things you already dislike.
True skepticism must be applied universally, especially to the institutions that claim a monopoly on objective truth.
It sounds like he's diagnosing a massive software issue in the human brain. Dogmatic scientists, or dogmatic politicians for that matter, treat their worldview like a smartphone operating system that they are absolutely terrified to update.
That's a great way to look at it.
They encounter bugs like the weirdness of quantum non-locality or historical anomalies, and instead of updating the OS to incorporate the new data, they just stubbornly insist the bugs don't exist because a new update would require them to change their entire user interface and admit they were wrong.
That analogy holds up perfectly, and Wilson's ultimate goal was to hand people the source code so they could constantly update their own mental operating systems.
Not to do that, he had to go to the root.
Yeah, as he explored this, he realized he had to attack the very language the code was written in. If our brains build flawed reality tunnels, the mechanism trapping us in those tunnels is built directly into the grammar of the English language.
Which brings us to one of his most radical practical tools. Wilson became a fierce advocate for something called E-prime. It stands for English prime. It is a modification of the English language that entirely eliminates all forms of the verb to be. So no using the words is, are, was, were, am, be, been, or being.
It's a huge restriction.
I have to ask, why target the verb to be? What is inherently wrong with saying is?
Because the word is makes a claim of objective identity. It is an assertion of absolute equivalence when you say the movie is terrible or that politician is a fascist or even this table is solid. You are taking your subjective opinion or your highly limited sensory perception and you are linguistically phrasing it as an absolute universal truth.
So you are projecting your specific reality tunnel onto the entire universe and demanding everyone else accept it an undeniable fact.
Precisely. But if you force yourself to translate those statements into E-prime, you cannot make that projection. You have to take responsibility for your own subjectivity.
Give me an example.
You can't say, the movie is terrible. You have to say, I dislike the movie. You can't say, that politician is a fascist. You have to say, that politician's actions resemble my personal definition of fascism. You can't even say, the table is solid. You have to say, the table feels solid to my hand.
Okay, let's test this right now. Let's hold a conversation for a minute entirely in E-prime. No forms of the verb to be.
I accept the challenge. Start us off.
This exercise seems difficult. I feel my brain translating every sentence before I speak it. The restriction forces a slower pace.
I notice the same cognitive friction. It demands that we construct our thoughts differently. We must focus on actions and observations rather than assigning permanent states.
It makes me realize how often I use shortcuts. When I eliminate those shortcuts, my statements sound more precise. I take ownership of my perceptions.
You articulate the exact goal Wilson sought. By changing the linguistic structure, we alter the neurological pathways. We dismantle the dogmatism at the root of our speech.
Okay, breaking out of E-prime now, that was exhausting, but I completely see his point.
It's a workout for your brain.
There is a quote from the character Sigismundo Celine in his fiction series, The Historical Illuminatus Chronicles, that nails the philosophy behind this. The character says, It is the idiocy of the word haunts me. If it were abolished, human thought might begin to make sense. I don't know what anything is. I only know how it seems to me at this moment.
How it seems to me at this moment. That single phrase destroys ideological fanaticism.
Because it humbles you.
If everyone thought in E prime, it would become almost impossible to start a holy war or a political purge over how things seem to you. You can only commit violence over what you believe absolute truth is.
And this rejection of the absolute translates directly into his political and economic views. Because just like language constructs our reality tunnels, language constructs our political binaries. If you stop saying capitalism is good or socialism is evil, you were forced to look at the actual mechanism.
This was exactly what he did.
The sources note that Wilson identified variously as an anarchist and a libertarian socialist. Now, as a reminder to the listener, we are objectively reporting his philosophical map here, not endorsing a political stance. But I need you to explain why he used those specific labels, because libertarian socialist sounds like another oxymoron.
It does in modern American political discourse, which operates on a strict binary. But Wilson was looking back to the classical anarchist traditions of the 19th century.
Okay.
When he criticized capitalism, he explicitly added a massive caveat to prevent people from misinterpreting him. He stated, "I ask only one thing of skeptics. Don't bring up Soviet Russia, please. That horrible example of state capitalism has nothing to do with what I and other libertarian socialists would offer as an alternative."
So he rejected state control.
He deeply feared centralized state control as much as he feared corporate monopoly. In Prometheus Rising, he explicitly noted his distaste for the spread of authoritarian socialism. He refused to be pinned down on a one-dimensional spectrum.
He described his belief system as a massive eclectic blend. He cited thinkers like Benjamin Tucker, Lysander Spooner, Buckminster Fuller, Ezra Pound, Henry George, Murray Rothbard, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, and Karl Marx. He threw all these utterly contradictory thinkers into a blender. What was he searching for in that synthesis?
He was searching for what he called the excluded middle in his essay Left and Right. A non-Euclidean perspective, he argued that we need to transcend the exhausted debate between monopoly capitalism and totalitarian socialism.
Find a third way.
Yes, he wanted economic frameworks that didn't fit onto the Euclidean left-right line. For example, he heavily praised a utopian economist named Silvio Gesell.
The sources mention Gesell. Why did Wilson admire him so much?
Wilson appreciated that Gesell was a businessman, not an academic theorist, which gave him practical insight. Gesell diagnosed that the core problem with the economy wasn't the free market itself, but the nature of currency.
The money itself was the problem.
Exactly. Gesell proposed a system called a demurrage currency. In a normal capitalist system, if you hoard money, it earns interest. Therefore, wealthy individuals have an incentive to pull money out of circulation, creating scarcity.
Right.
A demurrage currency is the opposite. It is money that actually loses a small fraction of its value over time if it isn't spent.
How does it actually work mechanically?
Imagine a dollar bill that requires you to buy a 1-cent stamp and stick it on the back every month to keep the bill valid.
Right.
Because the money slowly decays in value, hoarding it becomes a penalty.
Oh, that's wild.
Therefore, people are highly incentivized to spend it, invest it, or lend it immediately. Velocity of money skyrockets, wealth constantly circulates, and the hoarding of capital by a tiny elite becomes mathematically impossible while still retaining a completely free market.
It's a fascinating mechanism. It completely bypasses the socialist need for a state to forcibly redistribute wealth, and it bypasses the capitalist problem of monopoly accumulation. Wilson synthesized ideas like this under his concept of the or-ICH economy.
Yes. The or-ICH economy was an argument for a form of universal basic income guarantee, tied deeply to his SMILE philosophy.
The transhumanist stuff.
Right. He believed that technological automation should, and eventually would, perform all mundane labor. Instead of this leading to mass unemployment and poverty, he argued society should distribute the wealth generated by automation to everyone.
To free humanity from wage slavery.
Exactly, and allowing people to pursue creative, intellectual, and evolutionary growth.
So we've mapped out his philosophy: generalized agnosticism, E-prime, the Eighth Circuit model, guerrilla ontology, the or-ICH economy. It is an incredibly dense, intellectually robust framework.
It's a massive architecture.
But I have a fundamental question about application. To constantly police your own language, to never say the word is, to actively cultivate doubt about your own sensory perceptions all day long, to refuse to anchor yourself in any absolute political or religious certainty, did Wilson actually expect people to live this way? Or was this just a high-level, performative intellectual exercise for a man who spent his life in libraries writing books?
That is the crucible for any philosophy. Does it survive contact with reality? It is easy to be a witty, agnostic mystic preaching quantum uncertainty when you are healthy, successful, and safe.
Right.
It is entirely different when the fabric of your life is torn apart. And for Robert Anton Wilson, this philosophy absolutely had to survive reality because the universe tested him with unimaginable pain.
The biographical sources detail a series of heartbreaking realities in his life. In 1976, right in the midst of his success with Illuminatus, tragedy struck his family. His daughter, Patricia Luna Wilson, who was only 15 years old, was beaten to death in an apparent robbery at the store where she worked.
It is an unfathomable, senseless loss. The kind of event that usually drives people toward rigid dogmatism, either a fierce religious fundamentalism to find meaning, or a bitter absolute nihilism.
But it's worth noting a detail from the sources regarding how the family responded. Luna became the first person to have her brain preserved by the American Cryonic Society.
It speaks to a deep, profound commitment to those transhumanist life extension ideals we discussed earlier. Even in the face of sudden, horrific violence, they didn't abandon their reality tunnel. They applied their futurist principles to their grief.
But the tragedies didn't stop there. In 1999, his beloved wife of over 40 years, Arlen Riley Wilson, died following a series of strokes. And then, starting in 2000, Wilson himself experienced a major debilitating return of post-polio syndrome.
The illness he thought he had conquered as a child with the Kenny method returned to ravage his body decades later.
It's just cruel.
It really is. It caused severe chronic pain, severe muscle weakness, and eventually forced him permanently into a wheelchair.
By October of 2006, the situation reached a critical breaking point. The media theorist Douglas Rushkoff, a friend of Wilson's, reported a dire situation to the public. Wilson was not only suffering physically under hospice care at his home, but he was in severe financial ruin. He literally could not afford his rent, his medical care, or his basic living expenses.
Consider the cruelty of that situation. Here is a man who gave so much to the culture, who expanded the minds of thousands of readers, who taught people how to laugh at the darkest conspiracies, facing his final days in agonizing pain and poverty.
If there was ever a moment to abandon generalized agnosticism and become deeply, bitterly cynical about the universe, that was it.
But this is where his philosophy bore its most beautiful fruit. Because Wilson had spent decades building a community of independent thinkers, of outcasts, hackers, and intellectual explorers. And when Rushkoff put out the call for help, that community mobilized instantly.
The response was overwhelming. Blogs like Boing Boing and Slashdot and organizations like the Church of the Subgenius, the very Discordian communities his work had inspired, amplified the appeal. Within days, they raised a staggering amount of money. The sources say they raised more than enough to pay his debts and support him comfortably with medical care for the rest of his life.
And the way Wilson reacted to this outpouring of support is a masterclass in his own philosophy. He didn't react with entitlement. He didn't claim that karma was finally rewarding him for his good deeds. On October 5th, 2006, he posted an open letter on his personal website.
What does it say?
He wrote, "Dear friends, my God, what can I say? I am dumbfounded, flabbergasted, and totally stunned by the charity and compassion that has poured in here the last 3 days."
He then deployed this perfect, profound piece of humor. He wrote, "To steal from Jack Benny, I do not deserve this, but I also have severe leg problems, and I don't deserve them either."
That single sentence encapsulates his entire worldview. I don't deserve the charity, but I didn't deserve the polio either. It is a profound acceptance of the randomness and absurdity of the universe.
He wasn't playing the victim, but he wasn't pretending the universe was perfectly fair either.
It's the ultimate rejection of the dogmatic idea that the universe is a strict moral machine where A always equals B. Good things happen to you that you don't deserve, and terrible things happen to you that you don't deserve. All you can do is accept both with grace. He went on to say, "You have all reminded me that there is still a lot of beautiful kindness in the world."
He found the light inside his final reality tunnel. He continued to write on his blog as his health rapidly declined. On January 6, 2007, he noted that medical authorities told him he had between 2 days and 2 months to live. And his final message to the world is incredibly moving.
It really is.
He wrote, "I look forward without dogmatic optimism, but without dread. I love you all, and I deeply implore you to keep the lasagna flying. Please pardon my levity. I don't see how to take death seriously. It seems absurd."
Without dogmatic optimism, but without dread. He remained model agnostic to his final breath. He didn't rigidly declare that he was going to a glorious afterlife, nor did he rigidly declare that he was facing a terrifying nihilistic void.
He accepted the mystery.
He accepted that death is simply the final unknown territory, and none of our biological or linguistic maps can possibly chart it. He passed away 5 days later, on January 11, 2007, just a week short of his 75th birthday.
Looking back at the massive scope of what we've covered from the childhood polio and the Playboy mailroom to the Illuminati fiction, E-Prime, the Eighth Circuit model, and finally facing tragedy with such grace, how do you evaluate the legacy of Robert Anton Wilson?
I think his legacy is the revelation that his philosophy wasn't just edgy, countercultural intellectualism. It was deeply, profoundly humanizing.
Because it forces empathy.
Yes. Generalized agnosticism isn't about becoming a cynic who believes in nothing. It's about cultivating profound humility. When you truly realize that your map is not the territory, you stop trying to force other people to live inside your map. You stop trying to burn down the world to prove that your reality tunnel is the only valid one.
It allowed Wilson to face profound grief, physical decay, and his own mortality without an ounce of bitterness.
He retained his humor, his insatiable curiosity, and his profound gratitude to the very end. He reminds us that the universe is always weirder, more complex, and more wonderfully absurd than any human dogma can possibly contain.
So why does all this matter for you, the listener, today? I would argue that in our current age, an age defined by algorithmic echo chambers, fierce political tribalism, and the relentless social pressure to declare absolute, unquestionable certainty on every issue, Wilson's model agnosticism is practically a mental superpower.
It absolutely is.
It permits you to consume information from a multitude of opposing sources without being brainwashed by any of them. It grants you the intellectual permission to say, I don't know, and to find immense joyful freedom in that phrase.
It gives you the tools to step outside your conditioning, to update your mental operating system, and to choose curiosity over fury.
So we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over based on everything we've explored today in this deep dive. Take a moment to think about your single, most deeply held belief, the core pillar of your personal reality tunnel, the thing you are absolutely 100% sure is true.
The bedrock belief.
Yeah. Now, what happens if, just for today, you force yourself to translate that belief into E-Prime? Remove the word is. What if that belief is not an absolute objective truth about the entire universe? What if it's just how things seem to you right in this exact moment from inside your specific subjective reality tunnel?
It is a small linguistic shift, but if you truly attempt it, it has the power to change how you interact with everyone around you.
Remember the weather app on your phone? The map is not the territory. Keep the lasagna flying. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.